sit down in these official chairs.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. Off camera, hang out.
Hey, what's the pizza, man?
Oh, I wish I'd worn something nicer suddenly. Hi.
Me too.
I know all of you really well. I just to give you some background about where we're going with this,
There we go.
and what we hope to create from this seminar series. In our strategic planning last summer, we realized that we desperately need more coaches. And while we have a lot of people that play Ultimate, the vast majority of them probably doubt themselves in their ability to coach. And that falls on us to give people an opportunity to have experiences where they feel more prepared to coach at any level, and also to have more experiences to hang out with other coaches, because at the end of the day, we are our best resources as coaches. I speak as a coach, obviously. So the idea is to do one of these every month. Next month will be a coaching certification run by Aaron, and then he's going to go into hibernation for a while. And then March we'll come back with some more topics. So at the end, we're going to pass out some index cards, but we'd like to collect ideas of what you would like to see in this space. We've bandied about a lot of ideas, from things like how to recruit a new team, when to decide to split into an A and a B team, how to hold tryouts for an A and a B team, how to differentiate between a pulled and a torn muscle, what are the chronic injuries and how can you help those kids who always seem to have this one nagging injury, and how do we keep them healthy so they can keep playing for 4 years in college. So we have a lot of ideas, and the Spirit of the Game seemed like a really apropos place to start from. The idea was originally that we have the middle school championship coming up on Saturday, and we wanted to offer all you middle school coaches out there an opportunity. Yeah, not too. We're concerned about you. We wanted to offer the middle school coaches an opportunity to really kind of get their feet wet with this idea, because a lot of those coaches are not players themselves, and so the Spirit of the Game is a little different if they've been coaching basketball or lacrosse or something. So think about what you want to see in this space. Use this space to get out of it what you will. Feel free to go off of topic. I think that would be great. I think that this will be as good as all the people in this room, which means it should be really awesome. So I'm going to turn it over to Leslie, who's going to introduce our speakers tonight.
Thank you, Britta. All right, so for our first seminar series on Speaker of the Game, we have two wonderful speakers lined up. Our first speaker is Aaron Stern. Aaron grew up in Chapel Hill and graduated from East Chapel Hill High in 2000, before there was an Ultimate team there. He left the area for several years, but has been back since 2009 and coaching at East ever since. Aaron has been very involved with Youth Ultimate since he returned to the Triangle 6.5 years ago. He has been TYUL's West Conference Coordinator, a YCC Manager, a TIFTA Board Youth Committee Representative, and a USAU State Youth Coordinator. He is currently on the Triangle Ultimate Youth Committee and is a USA Ultimate Level 1 coaching instructor. Tonight, Aaron will be talking about international spirit of the game and the power behind it, drawing from his 3 years' worth of experiences coaching with Ultimate Peace. Our second speaker is Baker Pratt. Baker grew up in Raleigh and graduated from Leesville Road High School in 2000, where he began playing Ultimate his senior year. He then went to UNC and played with UNC Darkside, before founding and captaining the men's club team Los in 2005. Baker was the founding board member of Triangle Youth Ultimate League in 2008 and the coach of Enloe High School from 2009 to 2010. He worked for USA Ultimate in Boulder, Colorado from 2010 to 2014 as the youth manager of competition and athlete programs. In that role, he developed and managed programs local to international in scope, and was responsible for overseeing youth and high school coaching and competition across the country. He currently works for IBM as an information developer. Tonight, Baker will be looking at real-life examples and strategies that teams use to build spirit of the game into their own team fabric. Please join me in welcoming our speakers.
And I'll let you take it over.
All right. Thank you for having us this evening. As we know, most of y'all, it's really nice to see everybody out tonight. One thing Baker and I were discussing before we got started was that although I know most of you, a lot of you probably do not know each other. So before we get into our talks, we wanted to go around, have everybody introduce yourself, what your coaching role is, and tell us your thoughts on Spirit of the Game. You know, what does it mean to you, or what are some examples that you have had? That way that can help us lead our discussion following it. So, would we like to start over here?
Yeah, ladies first.
Yeah.
I'm Britta. I coach the Carborough Clams. And clams are very spirited animals, it turns out. And so I guess, what is spirit in the game? For me, when I watch the clams get layout D'd and then turn around and high five the kid that just did it to them, it is very much like embodies that kind of admiration for high level play, regardless of the setting.
Hi, I'm Ellie. I coach the B team for Carborough High School. I guess maybe similar to Britta, seeing high schoolers have to work things out on the field without being able to talk to parents or referees or expect someone else to do it for them has been really important as a coach.
I'm Amber. I'm co-coach at DSA Girls team, and I've been really impressed this year. It's the first year of the team, and they just have an innate sense of spirit of the game. They're so happy and bubbly and so excited when anyone does anything good on the field. And so I just kind of foster that.
I'm Jonathan, or John Nutt, and I currently coach a middle school / high school. And I guess spirit of the game for me is mostly respecting the people you're playing as well as yourself and your teammates and the rules all kind of wrapped into one. And not letting competitive spirit outweigh the spirit of sportsmanship.
I'm Oliver. I coach it's like a combined middle and high school team at Camelot Academy, tiny school. I really like their ultimate. We get like a huge percentage of the school to play, actually. But the way I see spirit of the game is playing the game in a way that maximizes everyone's fun. Like, that doesn't mean you can't be competitive, because being competitive is fun, but don't make decisions that make like the other team bad.
I'm Leslie. I'm Triangle Ultimate Team Program Coordinator. And to me, Spirit is kind of the backbone of what we do. It helps create a healthy level of competition while also developing life skills in the players, because there is the responsibility on the player to create a good sense on the field.
I'm Ken Rader. I am also co-coach with Amber with the Durham School of the Arts Girls Ultimate Team. I've been coaching girls both ultimate and soccer for 10, 12 years now. Girls in particular, but youth especially, seem to have an innate sense of what spirit means without actually explaining it to them. So try to just not screw that up. And if there are examples where you can go above and beyond to demonstrate spirit, we talked about what your mentioned where somebody tells us something really good, give it to them and have that positive portion. So try to emphasize that as much as possible.
Tom Munoz. I'm more of a team mom and chaperone and assistant coach and chauffeur for the Green Hope Girls team. Spirit of the game, to me, I'll have to read what I put on the team's Facebook page, because I gave them a huge example write-up on that with different examples. I lifted tidbits from other sages. But to me, really, it's kind of like have fun, bring a positive energy, and don't be a jerk.
I'm Ken Randy. I coach Culbert Middle School as well as a lot of Triangle Ultimate summer league programs and things. I think to go to Ken Rader's point, the kids I coach seem to have a pretty good handle on respecting their opponents and being good sports. And I think as a coach, the thing that I try and focus on is making sure that I am setting a good example and making sure that I'm not getting carried away on the sideline and getting too wrapped up in the competitiveness of the game, and making sure that I'm making sure it's fun for everyone and everyone's respectful towards their opponents.
I'm Troy. I'm about to start coaching the Hydras, which is the homeschool Chapel Hill Carborough group, high school and middle school. The interesting thing about Spirit is it's open to interpretation. People have sort of their own ideas about it, and some people prefer using different words. And in that process of acting it out and discussing it, you learn about other people and yourself in a larger sense.
I'm Tristan Green. I'm the executive director for Triangle Ultimate, and I think Spirit for me is really about holding the game and how it's played as something that is valued and focused on separate from players in competition, and so valuing the game itself for what it is that doesn't have to necessarily be linked to teams or who's winning or losing or anything like that. And it's something that in itself, the spirit of the game and Ultimate as a sport and what it is something that can be valued and focused on as what it is, which is a pretty great sport.
Wonderful. Thanks for those introductions and those thoughts on the spirit of the game. I want to touch on international spirit of the game a little bit, and that will lead into the power spirit of the game, mostly through the examples that I have experienced with the program Ultimate piece. First, I would like to read what the World Flying Disc Federation's definition is. All players are responsible for administering and adhering to the rules. Ultimate relies upon a spirit of the game that places the responsibility for fair play on every player. It is trusted that no player will intentionally break the rules. Thus, there are no harsh penalties for breaches, but rather a method for resuming play in a manner which simulates what would most likely have occurred had there been no breach. Highly competitive play is encouraged, but should never sacrifice the mutual respect between players, adherence to the agreed upon rules of the game, or the basic joy of play. I really like that definition. I think a lot of what you all said fits in there, said in different ways. But I really like that definition. That is slightly different from USAU's, which I do not have pulled up. My experience with international play, I have seen a lot more of what I would consider spirit of the game, highly spirited play at the international level. And what I mean by that is I feel like it's shown more than it is here in the U.S., or at least my particular experience is. In the U.S., the competitiveness seems to get in the way, especially at some of the higher levels that I have seen, versus internationally, you see a lot more discussions instead of arguments that you might see here. And abroad, that's also a lot more important because you have many more different cultures playing each other. Playing in Europe, there are different languages, people of different backgrounds coming together, playing at large tournaments. If everybody has a solid foundation and similar understanding in what spirit of the game is, that is going to make that game a lot more enjoyable to play. And we actually do have somebody in our audience this evening that has played on that international level. Nut over there has participated in Worlds with the U23 mixed team. And Nut, do you have any experiences or comments with your international play?
I think you're largely spot on in the sense that in my brief experiences playing internationally, it tends to be, probably a higher level of spirit, at least, I guess, from a small sample size of just like, if you just take a quick glance at it. I think there's tons of spirit in the U.S., but I think at the highest levels, obviously, it gets more competitive, and I think that there is trying to figure out if there's a balance, and I think in international play, at least in the mixed division, I can't speak to the other divisions because I only play mixed, but the balance is different in that it's not really a balance, in that international spirit, just because competition gets more intense, the spirit doesn't produce as much in my experience. Whereas a lot of the time, at least high levels of club, if competition increases, there's still undoubtedly a certain level of spirit, but competition increasing usually means spirit, by and large, decreases at least a little bit. I know in most of my most competitive games, I have not felt like spirit was lacking, but there have definitely been a handful of games I've been involved with that were super, super competitive, especially when they were very, very close in score, that it felt as though spirit was definitely diminished. And I don't think I can say the same about the international club. So,
do you guys do spirit circles at U23s?
With, I was going to say with every team. Yeah, I'm pretty sure with every team we did a spirit circle. It's a pretty big thing. And that was across divisions. I know that. Mixed division, open, and women's. Men's, women's, mixed, all did spirit circles.
Yeah, and I think that's a great question because actually one thing I was going to mention that's great lead-in is spirit circles. That is one of the things that I have noticed most internationally is at the end of games, no matter what happens, there's almost always a spirit circle where the teams will come together and talk about the game. It is becoming a little bit more commonplace in the States, especially at the youth level. I don't know, Baker, you might speak to this later on. I know USAU has started highly recommending it at the regional championships and YCCs. And we're starting to see it a little bit more at the youth, and hopefully it grows with the youth. As they get older into college and club, we will see. Moving from that into my other international experience with Ultimate Peace, what this is it's a program in Israel that brings together Arab Israeli, Jewish Israeli, and Palestinian youth. It's a year-round program, but what started it is a summer camp that they run. They've ran it for 7 years now. And what they do is they bring kids together that would otherwise never have a chance to meet each other to camp. So they get a chance to meet each other, hang out, learn a sport together, and create bonds of friendship through the sport. And their cornerstone of the program is spirit of the game. Because if you think about it, these are kids who, growing up, most of the people around them are teaching them, hey, these other group of people, we don't like them. They're not good. You bring them to camp, it starts help breaking down those walls. Even though it's summer camp in Israel, it gets hot, right? And both cultures have very strong personalities. On top of that, the play that we try and promote at Ultimate Peace is very fast-paced. So you add all those elements in together, and a lot of times you would expect there's going to be a lot of arguments, maybe some fights. But with Ultimate Peace and having Spirit of the Game as a cornerstone of that, the power of Spirit of the Game really brings these kids together. A lot of times, kids will come to the camp and then leave with new best friends. Somebody who barely speaks their same language, but it's now their brothers. I've had this experience the past couple of times that I have gone. At the end of camp, we do a closing circle. And what do you think of camp? What did you learn? And all of that. And a lot of times, our kids say, I didn't know you. I've never met anybody from your town before. I've barely had any interaction with other Jewish people, with other Arab people. But now you're my brother. After this week, we are now brothers. And a lot of them maintain those relationships after camp. The power of Spirit of the Game to bring people together is absolutely incredible and absolutely wonderful when you intentionally demonstrate spirit of the game towards other people. And I think that's a nice segue into some of the things Baker is going to speak on, as he's going to talk about some practical steps and things you can do to really show spirit of the game and how to incorporate it with your teams. So, thank you very much.
I think I'm on screen now. Thank you, Aaron, for that fantastic presentation on Ultimate Peace. Don't know how familiar everyone is within that program. For me, I was kind of cursory aware of it. I knew it existed. But if you haven't spent any time looking at the documents, looking at their websites that they put up there, it's really incredible. So I would absolutely recommend that. And then also thank you to Triangle Ultimate for putting the series together. I thought Britta's explanation of why these series of seminars are going to be hosted over this spring is an important one, and it's really cool to see the community continue to develop. So, like Aaron said, I'm going to talk about some practical steps for building spirit of the game, and this is going to be based on things that I both participated in as a staff member at USA Ultimate and helped build some teams, but also just saw really successful teams do, and I liked it. And I think they are the types of things that other people can emulate, and many already do. My goal, if there was a goal for this, would be, there's so much you could talk about around spirit. There's so much you could talk about with just spirit circles, for example, and why they work and when they don't work, and and how those set expectations around games when you know that you're going to be arm in arm with an opponent afterwards. So because of that, some of this will just be touching on some of these ideas, but hopefully afterwards we can dive into groups and talk about some of them. So one thing that we won't be doing right here in this next 15 minutes or so is talking about philosophy. I really enjoyed the definitions that everyone gave around spirit. I'm not going to be talking about that here. I'm also not going to be talking about officiating, self-officiating, refs, observers. Those are super important conversations to have around spirit of the game and our sport, but they're a little bit different from spirit, or they're a little bit different from the implementation, rather. And I often find that conversations around spirit kind of stay at a level of either broad philosophies or debating about self-officiating. So we won't be talking about that because there's really cool avenues for having those conversations elsewhere. I've got a definition very similar to what Aaron read about spirit of the game. I'm not going to repeat that, but I do want to highlight this italicized line here, because that will be kind of a focal point of what I'll be talking about. And that's that highly competitive play is encouraged, but never at the expense of mutual respect among competitors, adherence to the agreed upon rules, or the basic joy of play. And I highlight that line because in my experience, when I look back on a game and I think that was not a spirited game, I didn't enjoy that game, it usually comes down to there's some mutual respect that was lost or wasn't maintained, or the joy of play, like we just didn't have fun. Maybe we won the game, but it wasn't fun. And I will say, I enjoyed the definitions that y'all gave, and I enjoyed that many people said at the youth level, you find that the spirit is this natural outpouring of just kids playing. And that's super refreshing to hear. And I think there are ways that we can continue to harness that so that it doesn't fade away as games get more competitive or as people get older and move into other divisions. So this screen is self-explanatory and it's obvious in many ways, right? We are coaches here, we're leading, we are team leaders. But what I find with spirit is that sometimes there's assumptions made about how we're leading by coaching and instructing spirit. And those same assumptions aren't made with, say, strategy or tactics or in-zone offense. As coaches, we're very deliberate, right? We teach in-zone offense, we teach forehand passes, we teach how to catch. But we don't always teach spirit, or if we do, it's a passive teaching. It's a do as I say, not as I do sometimes in the worst examples. But it's not something that we always are very direct in how we structure our team. And I say this from experience. I coached Enloe High School in Raleigh for 2 years. I was a new coach. It was a brand new team. And I was super excited to coach them. And they knew almost nothing about Ultimate. And so I was so focused on forehands and backhands that I'm not even sure when we first talked about Spirit, like explicitly talked about what it meant to the team and how we wanted to behave when we got on the field. And they're good kids. They didn't just run amok as soon as we played the game. But it was something that later I reflected on. It's like, oh yeah, if this is going to be a core principle of our sport, why am I not talking about this as much as I'm talking about setting up a vertical stack? So I think we lead with what we say and what we don't say, and a lot of times it's Spirit that we have a lot of assumptions about what our teams understand and what we understand and what our opponents understand. And you play what our parents understand. So, building Spirit of the game into your team's culture. A couple of notes about when it's too late, and these are times that I see it happen. I saw it happen when I was at USA Ultimate. It's that first game or the first tournament, and all your practices have been fine, but suddenly the other team is making calls that are upsetting your players, or maybe your players don't even make that many calls, and they're wondering what's going on, and you have some players who are getting upset or angry. If that's the first time that the team has talked about Spirit of the game, it's going to be a rough tournament, or it's going to be a rough game. If you only talk about it one practice, I know it's super easy to do, and again, this is a trap I fell into when I was coaching. I'd have my one rules practice, and we talk about Spirit of the game, and then we've got a lot of other really important things to focus on. The most successful teams, and we'll have a couple of examples here, they build this into their entire season. It's not just the Spirit practice or the rules practice, but it's something that they do continually and put it at the forefront of what they're doing. So I'm going to do 2 examples. One, this is a real team. I made them anonymous to protect the guilty. But I think if you read over this, despite some of us having generally pretty good experiences with our own teams, probably, maybe it wasn't at the youth level, maybe it was somewhere else, you've seen, maybe been on some of these teams that act right with the bad fouls, bad language, spiking. And this was a particular team, anonymous team number 1, that had been acting this way for several years before I started working at USA Ultimate, but it had reached a level where other teams were retaliating, they were getting upset, they were getting angry, adult coaches were yelling at high school players who were on the field. It was not a good situation, and it was getting to the point where people wanted to remove this team from the league, remove them from tournaments, do a 1-year ban, something to teach them a lesson. Understandably so. As I started talking to folks, there were a few things that jumped out at me about that team and that I then found applied to other teams that were in similar situations. This particular anonymous team, number 1, didn't actually have a coach. It was a parent volunteer, which was fantastic, except that the parent didn't know a whole lot about the sport, was not very assertive. She was there volunteering her time, doing the best that she could do, but she was not engaged with structuring the team. It was essentially player-led, which has its pros and its cons. To get to where we had to eventually get to with this team is I started talking with the parent, who was the coach, and the players who were the leaders of that team, and figuring out what was going on from their perspective. Why were these games degrading into these call fests or overly physical play? And it became this series of calls with them. And then we expanded that to other coaches in the community who were having these issues with the team. Because what I found is that the coaches weren't talking to each other. They weren't, they didn't know who this parent was. The game would go on, something would happen, feelings would escalate, someone would get upset, they'd complain to an authority, but then when I came in and trying to figure out what to do with this mess, I realized they hadn't even spoken to one another. So we had these series of calls set up, and they were not easy calls. They were actually pretty awkward calls. But they did start to have a noticeable impact, right? By having the coaches and the players start to talk about what their expectations were around play, to start to understand, oh, if you spike it right at this other kid's feet, he's going to have feelings about that, and that you can have some control over that. It made a difference slowly over time. And there was a continual process, and to my knowledge, it still continues. The other things that we did with them is we did some required coach training, which I think is an important step for brand new coaches and even continuing education for other coaches. But what was perhaps most important was mandatory check-ins with other coaches. We required that this anonymous team coach number 1, before games, introduce herself to the other coaches so that if there was a problem, they would know who to go to. And I found this a lot. Maybe not so much leagues, like here we all know each other, we've coached against each other for many years. But you go to a tournament in Virginia or Georgia, or even those teams come here, and we don't know them. And if we don't introduce ourselves, it creates a barrier that when things go wrong, sometimes they just go unresolved and things start to fester and boil and bubble up. We found this simple act of just saying, hi, my name is Baker, I'm coaching this team. We're looking forward to the game. Please let me know if you have any concerns during the game, and we don't want there to be any hard feelings. We found that to be pretty powerful. Case number 2, Seattle riot. And this goes to something that Nutt said earlier too about there's in the U.S. highly competitive teams sometimes appear and maybe even self-diagnose as struggling with spirit. This is an example of that, where Riot received 1 year at Nationals received very low spirit ratings. They're towards the bottom, and they were surprised. It's important to note they were surprised because some teams might receive low spirit ratings and not be surprised and maybe not care all that much. But Riot was surprised, and so that off season they had a team meeting, and they realized that they needed to talk about what spirit meant to the team, how they wanted their team to be perceived by other teams, and so they came up with some ideas. And I am vastly oversimplifying the conversation they had. I talked with one of the captains, and she said it was a difficult conversation with people that had very different ideas about spirit. But some ideas they came up with were, when they're talking with the other team, they want to control their tone. They don't want to raise their voice. They want to address the other team evenly. They want to actively listen and make eye contact. They want to be proactive in checking in with the opposing team. That next year after this meeting, very similar to anonymous high school team number 1, they would go up to the other team and say, hey, we really want this to be a highly spirited game. If there are concerns, please let us know. Let's not let it wait to the end of the game or the post-tournament write-up online. And that they use these ideas to refer back to as a team throughout that year and continuing on. So when I was talking with the captain, I thought she had a really interesting idea that I hadn't considered, and that is, if Aaron is my teammate and he makes a call on the field, sometimes I can tell if it's a good call or a bad call, but that's subjective. But what I can tell is if Aaron was communicating within the parameters of how we want to communicate, if he was communicating respectfully. The way we communicate on the field is controllable, just the same way that we might focus on other controllables with our teams. And I liked that way of thinking about this, and I thought that's something that, as teams, as coaches, we can begin to implement. We can think about how we communicate with teams as something we control. We can't control their calls. We can't control if they go over the sideline, kick a trash can, and swear, but we can control what we say to them and how we approach them. They also continued by they had a post-game cool-down during tournaments. As a team, they would discuss spirit ratings. So these next 2 slides are just a series of bullet points. Some of them we've already talked about, but these are just things that teams do, or leagues do, or organizations do that are concrete, right? It's not just a nebulous, hey guys, let's be nice to the other team, let's be respectful and be sportsmen. But let's actually build some systems in place that will foreground spirit of the game and keep it very present for our players. It's not just at the beginning of the year we talk about it and then it's done and people storm off and get angry when there are bad calls, but we can bring things back into our core, into the principles that we've set. So, spirit captain, very briefly, this is something internationally that's done fairly frequently. It is similar to other captains, a person on the team that's responsible for spirit of the game. And I would say with this, it's very important that he or she is given really clear guidelines about what they can do. Because it's not very useful to say, you're the spirit captain and go at it. But if they're responsible for spirit rankings and getting their teammates' inputs, if they're responsible for introducing themselves to the other team, being there at the team handshake before the game, those are concrete things that person can do. A real quick example, at the tournament Nutt was talking about, I think it was that year, there was a very contentious finals match between the USA men's and the US and the Canadian men's, and most of you here, or some of you here, I'm sure saw it. What happened was the US team was they were playing physical defense, they're laying out into the backs of their team, the Canadians. The Canadians on the sideline are understandably very upset. There's some dangerous bids. The team US spirit captain recognizes this as the game is going on, calls a spirit timeout, and huddles up. The US team huddles up, talks about what's going on. The Canadian team huddles up, they talk about what's going on. And then during the middle of the game, in the finals of this World Championship, the teams huddle up, and the US team essentially apologizes. But they talk about how they were feeling, how they were feeling was leading to what they were doing, and basically what can we do to adjust this. I don't think that wiped away all the ill feelings the Canadian team had, but it was a nice course correction, right? We recognize this is going out of control. Here's a concrete step we can take to change that so it's not something that just ends or just spirals out of control as the game continues. Spirit circles were mentioned. I think they're fantastic and a relatively easy thing to implement. Spirit timeouts, you might not just want to call willy-nilly, you might want to check in with the other team. But awards, self-explanatory as well. There are end-of-season awards that teams build into around spirits, just like you might do for most improved or other things that players do. Set team values, that's essentially what Riot did, right? They decided what their team values are, and this can be absolutely done at the high school level. And it's really nice because then if you get the whole team involved, you can refer back to those things about, hey, one of our values is respect, and we talked about how we're going to communicate with the other team. What can we adjust? How can we adjust what's going on right now so that we get back within those parameters that we set as a team? Rules lessons is part of a practice, something that gets overlooked. It can be a continuing thing throughout a season. So much of the conflict does happen because of different opinions of what the rules are. And then teach players how to give and receive feedback. Again, looping back to that Riot idea of communication. There's lots of resources online. Speaker-listener technique, it's like a couples counseling technique of using I statements. There's probably some interesting parallels of two competing ultimate teams and arguing couple. But essentially, what we can do tomorrow. The other thing I want to mention here with parents is, Ultimate's at a really fortunate spot right now where we don't have a lot of hyper-aggressive parents, but they're coming, right? There's not something intrinsic about a Frisbee that keeps hyper-aggressive parents from shouting at other players, from shouting at their own player, the coach, observers. But if we set these team values and we talk about to our team about how we communicate, and then we bring the parents in on that conversation, I've seen it have a positive impact. I see parents who will level set within parents, and they'll say, someone who's maybe a new parent who's a little out of line, who's possibly parents-in-chief, will talk with them and say, hey, this is what we do on this team. This is what we do in this sport. Here's spirit of the game, and here's how we communicate. it's much easier to set that in the ground level than it is to come in 10 years later and then try and implement this. Like I said earlier, like, literally, if I could, like this, it's unfortunate. It's fortunate. You guys are fantastic coaches. But like if I could, when I was working at USA Ultimate, wave a wand and just get every coach to do one thing, and that was to introduce themselves to opposing coaches at tournaments, I really think that would head off so many of the problems that occur. Why does this matter? I mean, there's a lot of reasons it matters. One of them, I think, that is an interesting one that we may not all be aware of, is that we are being watched. In just one concrete example, at USA Ultimate, I was invited by USA Tennis to speak at their top youth tournament organizer conference in Orlando. And there's a variety of topics they're discussing. But they wanted me to come in and talk about Spirit of the Game and what it is and how Ultimate does it, because they're interested. Tennis, I don't know if anyone has kids playing tennis. Tons of people playing tennis. Kids, I mean, their numbers dwarf Ultimates. But they're seeing a few things. They're seeing lots and lots of kids dropping off right around middle school because the way that the sport is structured is hyper-competitive, where you get tracked into playing at these long tournaments, and it's much less recreational. And it's you get a lot more aggression. Parents are a big issue. When I talk to tennis and tournament directors, they were always talking about parents. But also players yelling at linesmen, requesting that there be lines judges there. Tennis, like ultimately self-officiated, and has officials that come in at certain levels. And they're finding more and more that they need more officials just to keep control of what they feel is a tournament that's spinning out of control. So they're watching, they want to learn how this kind of weird hippie sport is building out some of these ideas around self-officiating and spirit, and it's growing so quickly, and it seems like a lot of fun. But more importantly than that, more importantly than being watched by other organizations, is we want lifelong players. I really believe that people, I don't know if there are many people who hear about Spirit of the Game and then they start playing Ultimate. But they see the Frisbee, it's fun, everyone gets to be the quarterback, everyone gets to be the wide receiver, and so they enjoy it. But I do believe the reason people stay is the community and the Spirit of the Game, and the fact that we have to get to know our opponents, that we have to talk to our opponents, is incredibly important for building and maintaining that community as it gets bigger and more people join it. In conclusion, I would say that the two overarching ideas here are the Spirit of the Game is super important to level set, to understand as a team what the players are expected to do, what you as a coach on the sideline are expected to do, and what the parents are expected to do. And if we just assume that everyone knows, it may work, and that would be fantastic. But it can also not work, and I've seen it not work a lot. And then create a practice. It's not a one-off thing. It's something that we do continually. If we as a team talk about spirit rankings, then we do that. We don't just do it one time. We do that as part of our practice. Those are the two things. Thank you guys for coaching. Really, really appreciate it. And that's how we continue to build this awesome sport.
So originally the plan.
I can hear you, Brenda. You don't need a.
Originally, the plan was to break into smaller groups, but we are, in fact, a smaller group, even though we're pretend there's like 400 of us here for everyone watching along at home.
Blew it.
You can edit it out.
Yeah.
So I feel like we can have a lot of different conversations. I think talking about parents and the role of parents in the sport is very interesting, and we have parents here, which makes it even more interesting. And there's clearly a divide between parents who play either because they somehow convince their kids to play, or started playing because their kids convinced them to play, and parents who don't play, will never play, but have a lot of appreciation for the sport, and maybe 3 or 4 kids that are probably all going to play. So I think that's a really interesting conversation. I've had some interesting conversations with parents on the teams that I've coached. I'm sure there's a lot of other directions to take this in. So do you have a preference? Do you guys just want to talk about it? Or do you want to just break into groups of 6 or something?
Yeah,
Just talk.
Yeah.
Sweet. I'm going to turn this off.
Yeah, I think we're good with the video.
This is only